Alright, so in this game I play Pantheon. I'm still a beginner on this champion, but after the 10 or so games that I've played with him, I've noticed that the best way to play him, especially as a beginner and given my playstyle, is that he is really strong early game and can be especially strong mid game given basically play well early on in the game. Because a lot of champions that scale well, they can afford to not play so well early on and just wait until they get their experience, get their levels up, and then show their strength later on. But Pantheon has a lot of strength early on, so I won't be doing a lot of tower diving early on in the game and things like that because I don't want to go for that 1-for-1 kill. So dying is something that sets Pantheon back a lot, what I've noticed, because maybe by one death, maybe one or two early on is okay because he's a lot stronger than most mid lane champs early on in the game. But even if you're not getting a lot of kills early on, by just avoiding death, you're racking up gold and also as much experience as possible, and that for Pantheon is so important for him to show his strength around 15 to 20 minutes into the game. So he is a great one-on-one champion, and this game I think showcases that really well. So a quick breakdown of Pantheon's abilities. Pantheon's passive is Pantheon's passive allows him to stack up to 5 stacks whenever he performs a basic attack or an ability on any target. When he has built up the 5 stacks, the next ability that he uses will become empowered, and the empowered version of any ability is just the exact same as that ability, except the effects of it are projected. So if it's damage, then he'll deal more damage. If it's a stun, then he stuns for longer, etc. So the first ability that I'll talk about is Pantheon's W, because what Pantheon's W does is it allows him to jump a short distance to an enemy target and stun them. So the regular version of his W is that he stuns them for 1.5 seconds. The empowered version is that he stuns them for 2.5 seconds. The reason why I mentioned this one first is because that's the ability that I usually want to start off my duels with, my trades with. And all I'm waiting for is for Katarina to either get close enough and out of her turret area or use one of her combos, because a popular combo for Katarina is that she throws her knife and then she dashes to it to collect it. So I want to take advantage of that. So what you would have seen in that takedown was, what messed Katarina up was she threw her knife, she went to collect it, and by going to get that knife, because it's part of her combo, what she did was she put me in between her and her turret, which means she had to avoid combat with me by going through the jungle, and then Camille was there to help me out with that takedown. So a great thing about Pantheon fighting Katarina particularly is that he completely disrupts her combo. She can only use her W and her E, and once she does that, I can use my stun and it completely disrupts that combo. I don't know why I went in there. It made me waste my flash, so that was a bit pointless. I was never going to take on 4 of them. And that's another thing about Pantheon. He's not very good at grouped battles. He's a very one-on-one dueling type of champion. From what I've noticed anyway. I mean, I haven't played more than around 10 games with him, so I could be wrong. But as far as I've tried, his abilities don't really work well in a group other than his ultimate. So matchups against assassins like Katarina or Zed or Akali, Pantheon is really good against early game, because not only does Pantheon have a lot of power, but these champions that he fights don't really build defensive items. I was just waiting for Katarina to try her combo. All she had to do was come and pick up that dagger that she threw, and that calls for me to use my W, stun her, and finish her off with the rest of my abilities, because she can't take damage that well, like I just mentioned, and stunning her, it just puts me in a much better position, especially if she doesn't have full health. So not a good idea for her, but without her combos she can't really do much apart from poke with her Q. So Pantheon's Q is a little bit like Pyke's, where one version of his Q is that he can press Q and it thrusts his spear forward, and he can damage all enemies in a very small area in front of him. A second version of his Q is that if he holds Q, then it allows him to throw his spear a much further distance, and although it causes the same amount of damage, it can go through more enemies, which means it can actually damage more enemies, but it also has a larger cooldown. So if possible, whenever I'm dueling or if I'm in close range with an enemy champion, of course, not only is it quicker to just press Q, but it also reduces the cooldown, so I avoid holding my Q whenever possible. Camille's coming for the gank, so I just need Katarina to make the same mistake, and there it is. All I needed was her to go and collect that dagger so I could stun her. That coupled with Camille's stun, Katarina had no chance. So onto Pantheon's E. What Pantheon's E does is it shields him from all damage from a particular direction. And not only that, but in that same direction, very close to him, he deals a small amount of damage. Once it reaches the end of his shield time, then he deals an extra amount of damage in that same direction. Also, second casting E will cancel the shield, so that's usually beneficial if the opponent has moved behind you or in a different position to you, and so if they're not directly in front of the shield, it makes very little sense to keep the shield up, because you're not really blocking any damage and your movement speed is also reduced while the shield is up. The reason why I followed Katarina and then flashed back was because I wanted to make sure Katarina died from the ignite, and if she didn't, I would have thrown my spear at her. So if I was confident that she would have died, I wouldn't have followed, and then I wouldn't have needed to flash back. I flashed back just for safety, but Camille came luckily and we managed to take out all three, so that was perfectly counter-ganked. So right now I can see Yi is pushing up against my turret and he's releasing the Rift Herald. So whenever I see somebody pushing up against my turret, or if they're overextended even slightly, what I do is, if I have my ultimate ready, I use my ultimate and I target it so that I end up right behind them. So even if they have moved slightly, I still get right behind them, and that makes it really effective for me to not only deal that initial amount of damage, but also be able to kill them. So getting in between them and their turret is essential for using my ultimate, and that's the best way that I like to use it when there's only one person that I need to fight. So what Pantheon's ultimate actually is it's very similar to Galio's, where he channels for 5 seconds and then he rushes into an area of his choice. Now the ultimate casting area is so large, I think it's actually larger than Galio's casting area. So Pantheon has a really large casting area, and I think the area of damage is pretty much the same size as Galio's as well. But as opposed to Galio's ultimate, Pantheon's is very offensive, so I can cast my ultimate in any area and there doesn't need to be an allied champion there, but it is only for damaging enemies, not for shielding allies. That takedown just put way too big of a gap between me and Katarina. I was already 3 levels above her, so I didn't need any help getting a takedown on her, but Camille came, made it way too easy, and now there's going to be at least a 3 to 4 level difference between me and Katarina. So this is a game in the bag for me, basically. And the level difference is going to allow me to snowball and thrive mid-game, which we're about to reach now, basically. So between 15 and around 25 minutes, I'll be playing quite well in a game like this because of the massive level gap. So here, while I was roaming, Katarina's now pushing up against my turret, which allows me to use the same tactic I did on Yi and use my ultimate to try and get the takedown on her. So, very easily done. I didn't actually need to ignite her. Don't know why I went for it, I think it was just instinct. And those are the situations, like I mentioned earlier, I tried to save my ultimate for, because there's no way for me to use that while I'm actually in lane in a battle, because the channel time is too large. So there's just no other use for it other than for team battles and if I'm roaming, which I haven't been doing much of this game, so I tend to save it for those moments when I have to go back to base. I don't know if you saw that, but Pantheon's W also cancels out Katarina's ultimate, because Katarina's ultimate is actively working throughout the entire time that she's doing it. So Camille is going up for a gank on top lane. I just thought I may as well help her out. So she's going around from the top. So I'm pretty sure that Singed will go from the jungle. So from experience, I know that a lot of champions like to wait behind that exploding thingy so that they can get away to safety. So it was really important for me to start off that battle with my W, because going in to close range with him allowed me to be thrown in the same place as him. I was a little bit indecisive there because I thought that they might need me mid lane. Turns out they didn't, so I should have just stayed at the rift, but you know, it's best to be safe.
Red team's turret has been destroyed.
Okay, so from this point, the game is just way too one-sided. It's 35 kills to 12 kills, and they have pretty much no hope. So you can see that this is going towards a surrender, and they do end up surrendering at around 21 minutes. I think I stayed for way too long. I got overconfident after that ace, and I stayed with very little mana, and it didn't even turn out to be useful because all three of us died.
Killing spree.
And they surrendered at this point, so that's the game.